So there is nothing called as an action. When we say that activity is the nature of the living entity, that means there is nothing called as inactivity, or there is nothing called as inaction. So that means abstinence. Abstinence is a very perverted form of negative. Is a very abstinence. You can say our abstinence of physical activity in a very perverted way will lead to action on wrong trajectories. And that's why we see that uh, sometimes the attempt to restrain leads to explosion of material desires. Like if one says, okay, I will not take any sweet. So 1 week it will happen. Or next week there will be an explosion. Because not be able to handle it. So there is nothing called as inaction. Now if there is nothing called as inaction, but because it is a very artificial state, so it leads to very complex, perverted mapping. And therefore, directly jumping towards renunciation is going to create havoc. It's going to create havoc. That's why the solution is to act. And Krishna is proposing the only possible route is to act on behalf of Krishna. Because that is the platform where one is not incurring any sin. So this also goes to show that in this material world, any scores, positive or negative, very difficult to settle. Any scores, very difficult to settle in this material world. It will take a lot of time. So better don't incur any scores. Like the other day we were discussing that okay, the best strategy for life is never to take a loan. So any loan taking, loan giving, both are problematic. Positive, negative. Is it not? To take a loan, very difficult to pay back. To give a loan, very difficult to extract back. Like that. So loan taking, loan giving, both problem. So what is solution? No, don't fall in that loan trap. Is it not? Similarly, positive, negative, whatever karmic points are there, it is going to be very difficult to handle it. And therefore, the Lord is proposing if you don't enter into that arena itself, where we have to either where we occur either positive or negative. It's karma very difficult to settle. Karma very difficult to settle. That's why you see the conditionings are also compared to us. There is an analogy which is used to compare this conditioning, the pot analogy. The pot is used for, say, the pot is used for, let's say, liquor. Then even if the liquor is finished, the pot is washed, but the smell is still remain. So it's difficult or the example is given for a stain on a cloth. Even though a lot of vidunoti can be done, but still the stain will remain. So don't get smushed with any positive or negative taint. Yes.
we might be using that as we are acting on behalf of our participant in the work we are doing as we are doing our Krishna, with our working that our participant we are acting on behalf of.
Guidance. Guidance. How to understand we are acting on behalf of Krishna, right? Because of guidance. So actually, the modern day material world doesn't appreciate or understand this dimension. But the point is that you see, the point is that dependence is the way of see, dependence is the way of driving unaffected. What does it mean? So here now you see the Lord is now starting to talk about the five factors which are the cause of any activity. Why are we discussing the five factors? If we know the five factors, if we understand and cultivate dependence, ultimately knowing these five factors, dependence on the external forces, allow the external forces to take shape and act, then actually we are dissociating ourselves from the entanglement. So we can drive unaffected. We get affected only because of what's ego. That's it. That's why the five factors are described here. Quite interesting. And we will see that. So here Prabhupada is comparing the Vedanta Sutra, Sankhya to be the stock of knowledge and the Vedanta to be the final stock of knowledge. Yes. Yes. So there are these two ways of explaining, or there are these 2 points of why the five causes of accomplishment are explained by the Lord. One point is you see, so that we can understand these factors, we can depend upon them properly, and in proper dependence, we can drive unaffected. Second aspect, the Lord is the second aspect is that of guidance. So these, so when authority is consulted, one can have proper direction, and that direction and that trajectory will help one drive clean. We have to drive clean without being tainted. That is the point. Because once the paint, removing is very difficult. So you see, life is like that. One should drive clean. Just like in a vehicle, like in a car, even a little dent come or little scratch come, it's easy to come, but not easy to repair it. It will take a good amount of 20,000 rupees. Should drive clean, not get attached here and there. Drive clean and straight. That's the point. Next 14. अधिष्ठानं तथा कर्ता कारणं च पृथग्विधम् विविधाश्च पृथक्चेष्ट दैवं चैवत्र पंचमां the place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the super soul. These are the five factors of action. The word adhishthanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta. The soul is the knower and the doer is stated. The soul is the knower and doer is stated in the Shruti. It is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra by the verses Gnota eva karta shastrat shastarthava tvat. The instruments of action are senses, and by the senses, the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action, there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the super soul, who is seated within the heart of the friend. The supreme lord is the supreme super cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of spiritual super soul, situated within the heart, is naturally not bound by any activity. Those who are in complete Krishna consciousness are ultimately not responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, that is the soul, the supreme personality of God. So now of these five factors, we understand, okay, dependence on the right factor or the right principle will help us to drive unaffected. So here we are understanding the first cause is body. Now we understand the nature of the body is that the body has to act. Body has to be engaged in some of the other action. That's the need of the body. The senses. The Jnanendriyas, they are like CCTV camera. They will give constant photo shoot. Constant video shooting they give. The Karmendriyas, again, just like the body, they have to act in some way or the other. Because the senses are provocative. The body has to be just engaged in action. Body is just a machine. So the senses, the craving is ignited by the senses, and then the mind inflates it. So we have to understand. So another aspect is that the body is said because it says the place of action is the body. Now, everything has to be manifested on the bodily plane. The profile of devotion in the heart and devotion in the mind is not at all acceptable because the body has to be engaged. Otherwise, the absorption can never come, the steadiness can never come. Now, the senses have to give some or the other input. So when it comes to the inputs given by the senses, we should not keep fluffing each and every input. Like in a CCTV camera, it's not that we keep watching the whole camera reel. It is 24 hours on. So what you want to see, only if there is suspicion that something happened or some theory happened, then one will go and try to see. Okay, in those hours, 2 hours period, then one will see meticulously. All the time you want to see, it is going to be practical. So senses should only be tapped intermittently. When you need to tap the senses, you tap the senses. Therefore, you see the Vedic temples, old temples, traditional temples, they used to make these tortoises. So at the entrance door, it is shown a tortoise whose hands, legs, head, everything is outside. So what is saying? Okay, now you are entering the temple, open the senses. So whatever inputs are there, you drink it and the exit gate, there is a tortoise in a closed shell. Now he's withdrawn his hands, legs, head, everything. So only the shell is there. So now saying going out to the temple, why there is strong? So better. That's the point. Very interesting actually. So it's withdrawing. The tortoise is withdrawing. So we have to understand the senses when to tap and not to tap. Input signals will keep coming, but what to hear, what not to hear. Is it? Just like mobile also, it's up to us which call to pick up, it's not to pick up. Is it? In the same way, we have to do some settings. Is it not? Right. Similarly, in the computer, it's up to us. What we want to show the pop-up. If we change the settings, the pop-up will not come. Is it? No pop-up will come. Only when you open it explicitly, you can see. Same treatment is required for the senses. Now here it is said because super soul is one of the now the next step is said is there are various kinds of endeavors for any particular kind of goal. And then finally the super soul is being explained. Now the interesting point is that if we choose the right kind of endeavors, it pays the way. And the aspect of rightness comes from dependence on the super soul. So therefore, better to execute the supreme will of the Lord. Now, in the Ishopanishad it is said that the Lord has his hands and legs everywhere. So the Lord has his hands and legs everywhere. This means now in Bhagavatam Purport Prabhupada explains that this actually means that you see the living entities, they are acting as Lord's instruments. Ultimately, they are acting as Lord's instruments. See, the Lord is engaging. Can you imagine how powerful and how amazing the Lord is? The Lord is engaging every candidate in His service. Devotee, non-devotee, demoniac. Nobody can do anything against the Lord's will. The Lord is engaging everyone. It's like somebody wants to murder. So karma has to, the Maya Shakti has to kill anyway somebody. They just employ this fellow. That's it. So if everybody is acting according to the platform of service, then what is the difference between a devotee and a demon? So the difference is that, very interesting, the difference is that a devotee is conscious, aware and happy that he is uh, serving Krishna according to Krishna's desire. Whereas a demon thinks that let me act according to my desire. But Maya Shakti tricks him to act on behalf of Krishna only, isn't it? Under direct superintendence of Maya, but acting for Krishna's service. Is it? So ultimately it's like that. And therefore Prabhupada is describing that those who are in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. So another way in which we can interpret these five factors is the soul is a doer. The, the performer, that is the soul, is a doer. The the body and the senses are the instrument. Should be used only as an instrument, not as triggering, provocating, igniting agents. The super soul is the pivot, and the different kinds of endeavors are, that basically talks about practice. Practice to tune to Krishna. So Krishna's instructions. So that will make things complete. That will make things complete. Yeah, so the mind will be, the mind and senses can be clubbed together. That's it. Next 15. Sharira Manobhiryat Karma Prarabhate Naraha Nyayam Va Viparitam Va Panchayatatasya Hetataha. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused by these five factors. So, action is not just physical action. Here it is being explained. Action means bodily action, mental action, speech is also an action. What's right and wrong are very significant in this world because right work is done. Right work is work done in terms of the prescribed directions of the Shastras, and wrong work is work done against the principles of the Shastra. But whatever is done requires these five factors for its complete performance. So we need to practice. Nothing positive or negative can be achieved in one go. One needs to practice. Endeavor has to be there. On the mental plane, on the mental plane also we practice. We practice preaching to the mind that you better focus. You fool, you better focus. There is no other. I'm not going to hear you. Practice. Like that. Practice. Dragging the mind to involve the mind in an activity. Practice. Is it not? So what's the problem? This is such a nice service. Why can't I do this enthusiastically or nicely, responsibly? Practice. Is it? Practice is required. So similarly, relationship with devotees to improve that practice. Is it? So that is required for us. What is that? Peace? Pace. Place of action. Place of action means the plane on which the